I'm Mike Quackenbush. This is Till We Make It, and today I'm answering one of your questions. Does a wrestler need a notebook? And the answer to that question is yes. Now, let me go into further detail. I started keeping a notebook, and this is the third of the notebooks that I've had throughout my wrestling career, back in the middle of the 00s. And I was inspired to start keeping a notebook when I observed how copious the notes were that Chris Hero, now better known as Cassius Ohno, that he was jotting down constantly into his notebook. So I too took up the habit. And over the years, I've got 3 of these in all that I use not only every time I'm attending a class by someone else, or I'm sat in a relevant meeting, but also when I teach. So for example, just paging through this most recent book of mine, if I had to tell you exactly what I taught on October 7th when I was teaching for PWA in Paddington, Australia, I could go right through exactly the things that we talked about there. I have a complete listing of everything that I've done. And there are a few reasons why I think every pro wrestler needs to keep a notebook like this. So one of them is the most obvious reason of all, right? You want a documentation of all the things that you learned because the human memory is somewhat faulty. Now, something you may know, the human brain does capture all kinds of information. And in a technical sense, the brain does not forget. However, the brain cannot always recall where the information is stored in our brains. So even though, since you first started forming memories as a child, all of that is somewhere on that very cluttered hard drive, over time, we forget how to access where information we rarely or seldomly need is stored. The problem is not that we have forgotten, it's our inability to recall it from where it is stored. So that's very valuable. Having that record of everything that you learned in a class, or you presented at a meeting, or you taught in a class, having that set down in a permanent record, whether you like to do it analog like I do, I literally take a pen and jot it down page by page in my notebook, or maybe you prefer to keep it digitally. There's all kinds of great apps out there. You could put it in notes. The app Evernote is great for that, especially when it comes to sorting after the fact. There's tons of digital solutions if you are a note taker. But one of the main benefits of that is not just that you are recording it in real time, but that when it is over, when that class is over, when that meeting is over, etc., you can go back over those notes that you've got and then learn from them. So it is not just the record, but it is also an apparatus to help you learn. What did you take away? What did you capture out of a 2-hour class that you thought was relevant to you? Because chances are those will be the exact items that you made notes about. But in addition to just cataloging all the things that you've learned, there's something else very important that you've got to be doing as you are making these notes. And that is to include your ideas and insights as they are inspired throughout the class. What does it make you think of? Are you watching somebody teach figure 7 leg locks in the ring, but that makes you realize you have a brand new way that you could get to a scorpion death lock? Those kinds of important inspirations and ideas, they need to go into your notes as well. That way, if you are watching somebody present, like at a seminar, which can oftentimes feel strictly like a monologue, at least in your notes, there is the opportunity for there to be a little more give and take with the ideas. You may not verbally insert something into the class, especially if you get the vibe that's not appropriate given the way the teacher conducts their seminar. But you can, right there in your notes, add ideas. You can add insights. You can feel free to say, this is something we were just taught and I don't like that. This is something we were just taught and I think I can use it like this. And you can create there, right within the context of your notes, a dialogue, even if the seminar or meeting is presented in such a way that it feels like a monologue. One other massive benefit to keeping copious notes all throughout your pro wrestling career, whether it's something you hear in a locker room, a bit of sage advice. I know for a fact what is on the very last page of my notebook right now. I happened to be over for Fight Club Pro in England just a couple of weeks ago, and I heard a great insight delivered by Trent Seven that I absolutely wrote down in my notebook. He said this: he took umbrage with the idea that new performers would be out at the merchandise table right as the doors to the event opened. And I thought this is an interesting point of view. His reasoning was this. He feels like those performers need to entertain the audience first before they can expect them to pay any amount of money for a souvenir or piece of merchandise bearing their name or their likeness. They've got to earn that patronage. They should not expect it. And I thought that was a wonderful insight that he shared. And even though that wasn't part of a class I was taking or a meeting that I was in, I absolutely jotted that down into my notebook. And something important you've got to remember about your notes is this. If you never go back and review your notes, they're only half as useful as they could be. Because in this cataloging of ideas, in this collection of thoughts, are smaller pieces which, when combined through the process of analysis, could lead you to a great big discovery. But if you never go back to look through all the notes that you've taken and analyze them, you won't be able to assemble the disparate ideas into a giant whole. And sometimes that's where the most profound revelations will come from. And that's also one of the biggest benefits of all that note-taking you've been doing. So something that I make a point to do at the end of every month is I put aside just 5 minutes to page back through my notebook and put a mark next to everything that I thought was exceptionally relevant, to see if a larger idea does not start to emerge. And sometimes it does not. But many times it will be something I heard in this meeting or from this class or something that came out of my own mouth. And as I pull them all together, I arrive at something that is exceptionally valuable. And you too can discover that. But you'll have to put time aside to go back through all these experiences, all this education that you went through, and look at what did you capture and what made you write it down. So, long answer short, yeah, you need a notebook. If you're a professional wrestler, whether it's an analog notebook like this or a digital one that you keep on your mobile device, I think you need a method of recording your thoughts, inspirations, ideas, critiques, not just ones that come up in your own brain, but ones that are shared with you by a mentor, a coach, or anybody teaching a class that you happen to attend. And then put time aside every once and again to do the analysis. Just doing all of the writing is not enough. You'll only get half the value out of your notes that you would if you take time to go back, analyze them, and look at them from a macro view so that all these micro realizations can start to contribute to your career progress. And on the topic of note-taking, when I was over in the UK just a couple weeks ago, I was very flattered that someone attending one of my seminars came to me with my own book, 7 Keys to Becoming a Better Performer. And every page of the book had her notes written in the margin, questions that came up in her mind after reading what was on the pages, or realizations she had about completely separate topics that I was able to help her get to because of the information contained in the book. In that moment, it really made me appreciate the fact that to her, 7 Keys to Becoming a Better Performer was a dialogue she was having, even though I wasn't present until she brought the copy up for me to sign. This is a segue to talk about my book, 7 Keys to Becoming a Better Performer, which is awaiting you now over on Amazon in print or in digital format, whatever you like, or audible.com. The audiobook is available now, and I will read it to you in my own gabardine tones. It's got all kinds of tips and insights about performance and structure of professional wrestling.